Hello, thanks for joining us today. I'm Ivory and this is Roz. Our topic today is creating a tulpa. First, we'd like to say hello to our listeners in Rome, Italy. Oh, one of my favorite cities in the world. It's exciting to know that you're tuning in and enjoying the show. So thank you so much for listening. Like us, we had never heard of a tulpa till one of our listeners said, "Would you do a show on creating a tulpa?" And I said, "Certainly." And then I thought, we better research this.
We better figure out what this is.
That happens now and then with topics that we haven't even heard of it. But hey, if one of you is interested in it, and we might probably do an episode about it. So I'll start by saying a tulpa is an entity created in your mind. And it's acting independently of and parallel to your own consciousness. So this tulpa can think and have their own free will, emotions, and memories. In short, a tulpa is like a sentient being living in your head, separate from you. It's currently unproven whether tulpas are truly sentient, but we're going to treat that as such. There's many people who believe in this, and you'll learn more. It takes time for a tulpa to develop a convincing and complex personality. And as they grow older, your attention and life experiences help shape them into a person with their own hopes, dreams, and beliefs. So that's what it is. Where does it come from, and why do I have a Tibetan monastery in the background? Because the tulpa has its roots firmly embedded in Buddhism, where the tulpa was considered to be an aspiration of the contemplative life. In fact, the Indian Buddhist philosophy sees all reality as an empty essence, all reality a magical illusion. So that's the source. That's the origin of the tulpa comes from Buddhism. So how does a tulpa work? We were just talking about this. There's many different theories about tulpa creation and how the phenomenon works neurologically, psychologically. Currently, there's no way to say for sure how a tulpa works. There's different theories and thoughts on the topic, articles. That's where we're getting this information. I love this question. Somebody asked, can it be proved that tulpas exist? What do you think, Roz?
I think it would be extremely difficult. Unless this person or being of your creation and your manifestation were able to be seen visually, and that creates a whole new complication, because I see a lot of beings visually and always have. And I did not create these beings. They just like to come visit me.
But tulpas don't have an appearance. They don't appear.
Yeah. I mean, unless you could see it or some way acknowledge it, I think it's extremely difficult.
There's what's called a Tulpa community where they're really into this, and they're trying to help educate each other and encourage each other in creating a tulpa. And they feel like the only way to really prove it would be with an MRI or an EEG, which so far they haven't been able to do. I can see that. If you think about it, it would probably, if it was them thinking about it, one part of the brain would light up. And if it was another entity, like a being, a sentient being in your head, a different part of the brain might light up when they think or talk. So really, it's just like, if you're interested in this, you want to do it, give it a shot. Thousands of people have tried creating tulpas and are absolutely convinced of this phenomenon. So here's a question. Is it dangerous? No. And I was relieved to hear this. I wouldn't want to talk about something that's dangerous for you. First, your relationship with a tulpa is going to be very tight, very close. And you're living in the same head. You can't get closer than that. closer than twins right there. It allows you to understand one another's feelings and accept one another. It's mutually beneficial for tulpas to get along with their host, and you would be the host. Oh, it's a symbiotic relationship. In a large majority of cases, hosts and tulpas do become close friends. And as in with any personal relationship, I love this. Any problems can be talked out. Just talk about. I just can't even imagine this. I mean, I've heard angels in my higher self. I've heard my higher self, and I can't imagine having an argument and having to work it out with them. I haven't had that happen. I've gotten frustrated with them, but trying to have an argument in your head with a sentient being that lives in your head, that would be pretty mind-blowing, don't you think?
Pretty big to imagine that.
It is, and I was reading all this information and over the last week and just really thinking about this, and the more I read about it, the more it occurred to me that it'd be very difficult to separate a tulpa from your angels talking to you, because that happens in your head, or your higher self, which is your soul talking to you, which happens in your head. So if you create this tulpa, then you've got three potential beings that are talking to you. I don't know. What do you think about that, Roz?
I was reading a number of different descriptions and definitions and discussion, and I was kind of exploring the idea in my head that like in my case, I have other entities and beings that I have always had coming.
Whoop, we're losing you on video,
Like
Roz.
in my, I have odd coming in. Uh-oh.
Okay,
Must
Roz
be
is
something
freezing.
going on with the.
Yeah, we have Sedona has the worst internet service, and there's only two choices, and one's worse than the other. So bear with it. Try again, Roz. It's a little bit better now.
Okay. Hopefully our signal has improved. I just think it would be very difficult to separate. I mean, I'm sure in your mind when you're doing this, and in your energy and your heart, you are creating this other being that's coming in. I don't know how you would separate that in a way. I mean, if it's obviously it's your intention to do this, which it is, and you want to create this being in your own image or in your own, I mean, that goes into a whole other almost religious or spiritual aspect where you're creating that. I think it's kind of an interesting line to walk.
One thing I couldn't find information about when I started going down this rabbit hole of you wouldn't be able to tell the difference is I wonder if a tulpa can steer you wrong. Can it advise you wrong? Can it put a message in your head that's not for your best and highest good? That would be my concern, is that angels will only give you messages that are for your best and highest good. Your higher self, same thing, but a tulpa. So you know what, maybe there's somebody listening, I hope there is, who knows about this and has some experience with it, that can leave a comment about whether they've ever had that happen or heard of that happening, where a tulpa told them, gave them advice or gave them a message that was definitely not in their best and highest good. That would really be my only concern with it. I think it's such a personal choice. If you want to do this or you don't want to do this, you're certainly not affecting anybody else by creating the sentient being in your mind if you want to. Your tulpa is not able to move your body unless you let it, and you can ignore your tulpa. So they cannot physically harm you. That's good. Even in the extremely unlikely case they might want to, tulpas are just like people, and you can resolve any conflict like you would with a normal person. I'm going to say a reasonable person, because what's normal, You shouldn't give up on your tulpa after a disagreement or a fight. You should instead do your best to make things right again. Well, I think that's true for most relationships if they're important to you.
Very, very much so.
You don't want to just walk away from everybody in your life. That seems a little harsh. This is a question that really struck me. Roz, you know, before I got started in the spirituality field, I worked for 16 years in the mental health field, and I started in a psychiatric hospital. So somebody had asked the question, how is a tulpa different from serious mental illnesses such as dissociative identity disorder, which used to be called multiple personality disorder, or schizophrenia? I think that's a good question. Did that cross your mind too, Roz? Oh, she might be frozen. I'll just keep talking till Roz can come back. The internet's just so bad in Sedona. I'm not in Sedona. I'm working from my home about a little bit west of Sedona, better internet. So the mental disorders I mentioned above are usually caused by genetics or experiencing traumatic events. People with those disorders have symptoms that happen involuntarily, and they cannot choose or control their symptoms. Sometimes patients will black out, their place being taken by another personality without the host having any control over the process. These things don't happen to people with tulpas. You can choose to listen to your tulpa or ignore them, and you will not black out even if you give them control of your body. So that's really good to know. You have a great amount of control over how you wish to raise your tulpa, so you'll probably end up with someone with a personality you like and enjoying interacting with. The mental disorders I mentioned above are harmful and will hamper your ability to function. However, tulpas are benign and willful. I'm always a little cautious of that willful. If you
Yes.
approach this correctly, they will improve your life with their company and friendship. What's your thoughts on that topic? Like, I don't know if you could hear me, Roz, because I know you lost the internet for a moment or froze up, but about how it could be similar compared to dissociative identity disorder or schizophrenia.
I think there's a very thin line there. And I think that many people that are diagnosed with mental illness, this is a set of parameters and rules set up by a bunch of doctors and psychologists. And, you know, these are their rules. It doesn't make them fully accurate, and it doesn't make them true.
No, the
So-
majority of psychiatrists are extremely closed-minded to anything paranormal, supernatural, celestial, anything outside of 3D. And I know because I worked with them, but they worked for me later. There was one out of 16 years who was open to it, into it, a joy to work with. Oh, his name's Jason. Hi, Jason. But so this is different than that. So, and then somebody had asked, if you do have a mental illness, can you still make a tulpa? And in most cases, it's deemed to be fine. People who are highly knowledgeable about tulpas have not yet discovered a mental illness that would prevent creating a tulpa. In some cases, mental illnesses have been aided by the creation and presence of a tulpa. Another good
That's
question.
really interesting.
I know. I have friends who have mental illnesses, including dissociative identity disorder, and I'm actually going to talk to them about this because nothing else has really helped them. There's very little out there to help that and schizophrenia, really, other than heavy-duty medication that pretty much turns you into a zombie. So somebody
Well,
else asked, is this... I'm sorry, go ahead, Raz.
They can't even define you know, in traditional treatment of mental illness, they can't even define or specify how those events occurred, how they became, you know, schizophrenic, how they became with the dissociative identity, and you know, so how do you work with it then? But
yeah. It's
I
pretty tough.
think
Really, we're in our infancy in psychiatry and psychology as a species.
true.
Probably in
And
medicine
actually,
too.
I just think a lot of those practitioners would be better off if they were open to learning some.
Whoop, we lost your...
of the
You're
norm.
really like, we're catching every other word or every 4 words, Raz. You might have to turn off your video for us to hear you clearly.
right,
Try
I'll
that.
try that.
Try that. Most people are listening anyway. I'm sorry for those of you who are tuning in on YouTube, but it's more important to hear Roz. Let me try this because it's not going away. There we go. Now try Roz.
I turned off my video. Hopefully that assists it. I
Yes.
am getting very frequently the words coming across, your internet connection is unstable.
What a
Duh.
shock. What were you saying? Because we didn't catch any of that.
I just feel like since they can't even in the traditional mental health approaches, they can't even specify exactly what creates or even what these diseases, quote unquote, are. I personally think some of these people are shaman. Some of these people hear and see and experience things. My mother always used to caution me, like, be careful what you tell people, because you could end up in the mental hospital.
She's right.
You could always see and hear on the other side.
She's right. Now, the majority of people that were in the hospital needed to be there, but there were a few who I knew were psychics, mediums, shaman, mystics, abductees, a lot of different things. Another question that was brought up that was interesting, it's going to be a brief conversation, is creating a tulpa magic? Here's the answer. No. That's it. No.
It's really about creating the manifestation of your intention. Mm-hmm. You are seeking a being that has certain specific personality and behavioral things to offer you, and you're not finding it, so you just create it. Yeah. Which, we certainly have the power and the ability to do some of these things.
Our minds are so powerful, and I like to talk to people about, when they come to see me, about manifestation, and like give some examples of how over the years, like, you get better and better at it till you barely mention something and boom, it happens. And so I can see how you set the intention to have the sentient being created in your mind, and then you have this friend with you that lives in your mind.
Very true.
So very true. Could you already have a tulpa and not know it? And that actually is an extremely common phenomenon among those who actually start learning about tulpas, and they realize they already have one, because tulpas develop through focused attention, which is manifestation. They can potentially emerge when you spend a lot of time thinking about a character or talking to an imaginary friend. So if you think you have something like that, have a close look at them and answer these things for yourself. Are they independent from you, seemingly doing things of their own volition? Do they surprise you sometimes? Do they feel like another human being rather than just a character? If you answered yes to one or more questions, your character could be described as a tulpa. They might not be fully developed or sentient yet or independent, but if you decide to treat them as a tulpa from now on and work on developing them and learning to communicate with them more clearly, they can become a fully independent tulpa.
Interesting.
Now, I had friends, imaginary friends as a child, but they all ended up being angels.
I had a lot of imaginary friends too, that I talked to and that I saw. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting now, because when I was a child, I saw them frequently as other children, not always, but then when I crossed that age where suddenly you start going into maturity, mm-hmm. they became beings that were adults. So they kind of morphed.
I think they do that because children feel safe and comfortable around other children.
I agree.
So what is a tulpa capable of? Like, once you've developed your tulpa, what can it do? Did you look into that, Roz?
I didn't say anything on that. actually.
It's said that the tulpa can do anything the host can do, so that'd be you and nothing more. Tulpas are human, like you and I, and have the same potential and limitations, but due to the differences between the nature of the existence of hosts and tulpas, hosts could naturally have an easier time doing some things like controlling the body, while tulpas may innately be able to do some things the host would not be able to do without some practice, such as completely immersing yourself in the wonderland. And we're going to talk about what is the wonderland in the world of tulpas. Somebody else asked, can your tulpa help you with things like memory recall and schoolwork? Good question. Somebody's thinking here.
That's a very good question.
And it's possible, but most likely what your tulpa can bring to the table will be dwarfed by making a direct effort in whatever you're trying to improve. This is especially true of memory recall and similar mental tasks. Even if your tulpa can help you, it doesn't necessarily mean they will. So you shouldn't create them purely to be a personal notepad or like a calculator. That seems wise. That seems kind. We don't want to create a sentient being to be a calculator. That's just not right. Do tulpas have limitations?
That's an interesting question.
Mm-hmm. Tulpas develop based on their hosts and their own beliefs. So a host can consciously choose to enable or restrict their tulpa in various ways. For example, a host can choose whether or not the tulpa can listen in on the host's thoughts or access the host's memories. And whether you realize it or not, you have a set of unconscious beliefs about tulpas acquired throughout your daily life or from what you've read about tulpas. And that's why it's important to take everything with a grain of salt and consciously think about what feels good and right for you. If you discover limiting beliefs, then try to rationalize them as you find them and know that the limiting belief is really the only cause of the issue in question. So your limiting beliefs limit your tulpa.
That's a really good question.
It is. There were so many good questions. I was like, wow, people really dive into this. So we promised we're going to talk about how to create one, and we are. That's not an empty promise. This wasn't like a bait and switch. To create a tulpa, you simply must think about and spend time with a sentient being, a tulpa, that is living or being created in your mind or brain. And spending time with your tulpa is often called forcing or forming. But it isn't forcing something into your tulpa. It's called forcing because you often work on your tulpa's form, personality during this time, and you can spend it in any way you like. Sitting down, lying down, focusing on your tulpa as the total focus of your attention. That's referred to as active forcing or just forcing. While focusing on your tulpa while doing other tasks is often referred to as passive forcing. So many people like communicating with their tulpa when they're thinking about them, and this can help people concentrate on their tulpa, add some meaning to the sessions with them. It can make the sessions more interesting. It can make the tulpa more involved and can be useful in other ways as well. That's commonly referred to as narration. So you can talk about anything and not just narrate what's happening around you. You can talk to your tulpa in your head or out loud, but it doesn't matter much to most tulpas, just as long as you talk to them. What'd you see about that, Roz?
I think that actually is very logical. Really. I mean, you've created this energy of this being. And you certainly want to be able to discuss and share and interact on any level about any subject and be able to feel comfortable with that.
I think it's sort of like these, you've seen sci-fi movies where they create a person, and the person may look like an adult, but they don't know anything. And so they have to show them things and teach them things and talk about concepts and educate them. And it's very similar to that. By the way, the tulpa can communicate back to you, and they can do it through head pressure, body language, emotional response, and thoughts in your mind. And at first, the tulpa's thoughts might seem like yours, but they get more and more distinct over time. So don't dismiss them just because their thoughts sound like yours. If this reminds you of what I've said about angelic communications, it is really similar. I would not recommend that you try creating a tulpa when you're also trying to develop a strong relationship with your angels. I think it's going to get very confusing.
I think so too.
If you can't hear your tulpa yet, don't become frustrated. It might be they don't want to talk, don't have anything to say. You can't hear them yet, or you can't discern their thoughts from yours. In other words, it doesn't necessarily mean you're doing something wrong, just like angelic communications. So, Roz, you brought up something earlier, like tulpas often use form, like we were talking about, like what they look like. But this isn't strictly necessary, but most hosts and tulpas prefer it that way. And there's many reasons for a tulpa to have a form. Some of them being that you might be able to direct your attention to your tulpa more easily, or have a spatial representation of your tulpa. They'll be able to interact in a mindscape wonderland. I'll talk more about that later. They can communicate by body language, etc. And that form can be anything from a realistic or unrealistic human body, a humanoid form, an animal, realistic or not, to a cloud, energy, or some other undetermined or abstract form. It isn't necessary to have only one form. Your tulpa can take more than one, or they could just change form whenever they desire, like a shapeshifter. This whole thing crosses over into a lot of different areas.
It does.
It's very interesting, but it's not surprising because it came from a kind of isolated part of the world. And now it's crossing over into sort of Native American beliefs. Very interesting.
True.
There are two general ways you can see your tulpa. One is in your mind's eye, just as you want to see them, or as a real entity in real life. And we'll talk about how to see your tulpa in real life, but now we're going to concentrate on seeing them in your mind's eye. There are many ways to see things that way, but we're going to show you how you already do it. So imagine a brown wooden chair. And if you've done it correctly, you have just seen a brown wooden chair in your mind's eye. And in the same way, you can see your tulpa. And just don't get frustrated if your ability to see with your mind's eye isn't great at first. It doesn't have to be good to see your tulpa, and it always gets better with practice. Don't forget the forming of your tulpa's personality. Form or anything else doesn't have to be done only by the creator. You can and probably should give some freedom to your tulpa to change them, or you can even decide to give them absolute freedom and choose whatever they will. There's many guides that are here to accomplish something or just to help you along the way, and you can decide to use them to help you, or you can get to the goal your own way. There's really, just in almost everything, there's no single one way, correct way to the destination, but just because you're doing something differently doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It's also possible to use multiple guides at once without it affecting you negatively, but it's important to remember that creation of a tulpa is very subjective, that you don't have to get the reactions or results that others do, and you can get them faster or slower than others. So, oh my goodness, here we go. How long does it take to make a tulpa? Got any guesses on that, Roz?
I think that's a very wide-ranging question.
100%. 100%. They say that for them to become vocal, it usually is between a week and a few months. And some people, especially those who've done role playing or writing characters, have an easier time reaching what they call vocality than others. But note that you're not finished at that point. There's always more room for them to grow in personality. You can always work on refining your ability to perceive your tulpa and learning advanced skills such as imposition and switching. A young tulpa will be dependent on the host, on you at first, but over time, they become more independent and they will grow as a person. It's very interesting. None of these things, there is no hard and fast in anything in spirituality. I mean, it takes the time it takes. And I don't think it's just in spirituality. I think that's life.
That's a good life lesson.
Yes, it is.
Mm-hmm.
Here's one for you. How long does it take the average human to emotionally mature?
That's another wide ranging.
Exactly. Same concept. So how do you know when your tulpa has become sentient? I think that's a really good question, especially when you're new to all of this. Like, how do you know? So it's impossible to prove it. And it's just as impossible to prove that another person is sentient. Science has tried, they can't prove it. So all you can do is observe the person's behavior until you can reasonably conclude they are sentient. And if you don't know whether your tulpa is sentient, try to observe their behavior over time. As they grow older, they're going to show more signs of independent, intelligent behavior. And for a while, you're likely to find enough subjective proof to conclude that your tulpa is sentient. They're having their own thoughts. That's what sentience is. If you are unsure, you should wait, give your tulpa more attention, and keep observing. It's best to go about this with a non-judgmental, objective mindset. There's no use in worrying. I think it comes back to one of Roz's favorite quotes, everything in divine time. We cannot rush these things. It's not going to happen before it's meant to happen.
Very true.
Some anxious type A personality asks, can I do different stages of developing a tulpa all at once? It's possible.
Very complicated.
It could be more fun, is what the experts say, to work on all kinds of different things with your tulpa right from the start. You can start by practicing visualizing. You can narrate to them. You can force personality traits. It really doesn't matter what order you do it in or what you teach them first. All these things can be done interchangeably, can be done at the same time, and find out what works best for you. I think also as your tulpa becomes more sentient, what works best for them. Maybe they feel overloaded if you're trying to do too much at once. Like
they
humans.
Probably are going to have their own opinion.
Exactly. So you could ask them, am I rushing this? Is this too much? Do you need me to focus on one topic more for you? They'll tell you. I'm only guessing. I don't have any experience with tulpas, but I'm guessing based on all of the research from experts that they would let you know. So people who want to create one might be thinking, oh, what's the time commitment to this? Like, how much attention does my tulpa need in interaction? During that creation process where you're first creating your tulpa, you should aim to interact with your tulpa daily. It could be anywhere from a few minutes up to a few hours. In general, it's good to give your tulpa as much attention as you can. I think it's like, I hate to say this, and please don't be offended, but like having a new pet in the house, and they're going to need, and any pet's going to need a lot of attention from you. You know, you don't want to create a tulpa and then ignore it for days on end. So after your tulpas become sufficiently independent, it's no longer required to give them as much attention to sustain them, but it's still good to spend time them when you can so they aren't lonely. You don't want to create a lonely tulpa.
Well, the bottom line here is if you are creating a sentient and independent being, they don't need you after a certain point.
No, they don't. They're just kind of being there. We are out of time and there's still so much more here. There's a few more questions that we have that I think you'd like the information on. And then like if people are having some problems with it, things that might happen, you need to be aware of and what it means and what to do about it. We will continue that over on our Patreon, which you can check out for free for 7 days. Watch this extension of this podcast and anything else that's posted there for 7 days. And just know next Friday, our topic is Oracle and Tarot cards. That's going to be fun. That's going to be an interesting topic.
Very interesting.
Yeah. In the meantime, we hope that you have an enlightening week.